The Elder Scrolls Arena was released in February of 1994 and was Bethesda's first step to making the world of Tamriel. It contains the roots of many different features and mechanics that we've all come to love in the later games. With that being said, it also does some things differently to its successors, following the more traditional RPG route. While it certainly has some age to it, Arena can still house a fun and enjoyable environment for the fantasy adventure fan. In today's video, I wanted to go through the Elder Scrolls Arena's main questline. I wanted to experience Dagoth-Ur's betrayal and the retrieval of the Staff of Chaos. While there are only 10 quests in the storyline, I've recorded over 7 hours for the first few alone. So even though this video isn't that lengthy, just know that it's put me through the fire. I'll be giving a narrative on the story as well as the dungeon crawls, describing some of my trials and tribulations, while also listening to the dialogue and cutscenes. Without further ado, let's hop into the world of Arena. Booting up the game, you're presented with a slide of scrolls that help shed some light on the lore. They explain how Tiber Septim went on a conquest to unite the continent, how Tamriel, Dawn's Beauty, isn't a name that the citizens use anymore. The continent's fallen on hard times, and as such, the land is referred to as the Arena. Fast forward 492 years, it's Emperor Uriel Septim VII's 43rd birthday, and it's said that jealous hearts desire the throne. After selecting Start New Game, more scrolls are shown to the player. Uriel and the Imperial Guard leader, Talon, have been summoned by the Imperial battle mage, Dagoth-Ur. Tharn wishes to discuss possible treachery within the Empire. That's when the jealous battle mage reveals his true hand and betrays the two men, transporting them to a different dimension. Tharn is then able to take the throne for himself. The only other party to know of this treachery is Rhea Silmain, Jagar's apprentice. However, she's quickly captured. Tharn then uses magic to impersonate Uriel Septim and to turn his wicked servants into the Emperor's Guard. Now it's on to the character creation portion of the game. While it's not necessarily an important element to the story, I wanted to briefly go over the type of character that I was playing as. After doing a trial run, I discovered that magic wasn't going to be very easy for me to use. Especially at lower levels, magicka runs out quickly and it could be tricky to regenerate the bar mid-dungeon. So I decided to go with a simple vanilla warrior, hide behind a skin of steel while slashing away with a long heavy weapon. As for my character's race, I picked the tried and true Nords of Skyrim. Thinking my attributes and the bonus points could be a bit better, I hit a reroll and ended up being successful with it. Sure, there were some sacrifices, but I brought my strength and endurance up to level 75 and 74 respectively. Digging the terrified Terminator T-800 character model, I was ready to step foot inside of Tamriel.
Do not fear, for it is I, Rhea Silmain. Listen to me, there are no others left to carry on this fight. You have been left in this cell to die. Dagoth-Ur, Imperial battle, Mage of Tamriel, has taken on the guise of the true Emperor. He does not see you as a threat, being only a minor part of the Imperial court. In that act of arrogance, he has made his first mistake. Look to the north wall of the cell. You will find a ruby key which will unlock the door. Take it and make your escape. The passages here were once used by Tharn to hide treasures he had stolen from the Emperor's coffer. If you wish, you can gather enough to support yourself away from the Imperial seat. Be careful. There are many creatures which inhabit the sewers now, vile rats and goblins. It is too late for me, for I am already dead. Only my powers as a sorceress keep me between this life and the next. That power, however, is waning. Do not succumb to greed, or you may find these tunnels to be your final resting place as well. I can still work my magic to a certain extent. If you travel west from this cell, then south, you will find a shift gate. It will transport you far enough from the center of the Empire that you should be safe. If you survive these sewers, you will see me again. Remember, Tharn has taken on the guise of the Emperor. No one will gainsay his word for yours. I will come to you again in your dreams, so it is imperative that you rest from time to time. In that way, I will be able to communicate with you and lend my aid. You are entering a dangerous arena, my friend, one in which the players are beings beyond your mortal comprehension. do not envy your role. There is, however, a power within you as yet untapped. Look for me when you have gained experience in the world. You are my last and best hope.
Rhea Silmain acts as the guide and quest giver for the rest of the main storyline. I'll be hearing a lot more from her as the game goes on. Looking around, my character is indeed locked inside of a prison. However, quite conveniently, the ruby key needed to escape my cell is located inside the room with me. While it's a simple escape, finding a key and unlocking the door is practically an introduction to how dungeons work in this game. Only in the future, the key won't be so easily obtainable. Just outside of the gate is one of the aforementioned stashes of loot which Rhea was talking about. She also said that if I'm not careful, this prison system might end up being my final resting place. While it's a small dungeon, there are quite a few nooks and crannies to explore. Many of the chambers hold equipment and riches, yet you'll also likely come across rats and goblins. They can prove to be rather fearsome foes for lower level characters. By dying, I'm revisited by the apparition of Rhea. She says that I failed my quest, Tharn is now free to rule over Tamriel, and the continent will only continue to get more corrupt. Of course though, the only real consequence is reverting back to my last save. Silmain's instructions were to head southwest. By cutting through tunnels that zig south and others that zag west, I found myself running down a long corridor. A message appears saying that I can see the shimmering field of the shift gate, and before I know it, I'm standing at the foot of a mysterious blue portal. Going through it, I've successfully escaped the first dungeon and am now a free man out in Skyrim. From here, I'm free to venture to other cities, explore random local dungeons, or embark on simple side quests. Because I've ascended to level 2, the next part of the quest comes rather easily. Asking around for the nearest inn, the Red Chasm, I stumbled on into the tavern and rented a room for the night. Resting and regenerating my bars, I was revisited by Silmain.
I see you have strengthened your arm and your mind. It is time we began this journey. This is the Staff of Chaos, the one item that can open the door between this world and the dimension to which the Emperor has been banished. Tharn used this item to destroy my corporeal form when I tried to warn the Council. He knew that the Staff of Chaos was nigh indestructible, having been made from the essence of the land itself. But in that he found the key. As the land is split, so did he shatter the staff into 8 perfectly formed pieces. These he scattered across the realm. I have been able to divine the location of the first piece, a place called Fang Lair. It is said that Fang Lair was originally built by the dwarves of Kragan. Legend has it that a great worm drove the dwarves from their home in the Dragon's Teeth and took the lair for itself. I only wish I knew the exact location. Perhaps there are sages or scholars who would know of this place. Somewhere in its dank depths lies the first piece of the Staff of Chaos. I wish you well. I do not think Tharn knows of your escape, but I can do little else in this form. I have tried to obscure your identity with a spell, but I do not know how well it will hide you. Take care, for Tharn may be searching. Go forth with the blessings of the true Emperor, and myself.
Rhea just gave me my objective for what is practically the rest of the game, to find all 8 pieces of the Staff of Chaos. The Elder Scrolls Arena's main quest formula is actually pretty simple. I start by asking the local NPCs if they know where Fang Lair is. Sometimes the locals would either mock me, saying that it's just a place of legend, or they'd throw in a red herring and say that I need to ask a priest from the temple. The priests of Skyrim had nothing to say on the matter though. Eventually, someone tipped me off and said that Fang Lair was in the wilderness of Hammerfell. Popping open the map, I picked a random location and fast traveled over to the city of Dragonstar. Asking for more information there, I was once again bounced around from establishment to establishment, this time checking in with the local inns. With no dice there, I resumed my street patrol until I heard word that Fang Lair is near the city of Rihad. So, packing my bags and traveling over there, I resumed my search until finally I heard some vital information. The Palace of Rihad has apparently deciphered the location of Fang Lair through some ancient scrolls. Making my way into the royal court, I approached Queen Blabamka, and together we had a little chat. In exchange for the location of Fang Lair, Blabamka needs a favor from me. The scroll that holds the location of the dungeon was stolen by Golthog the Dark and his pack of goblins. It was taken over to a place called Stone Keep. The queen asks me to retrieve it in return for knowledge on Fang Lair. With no choice but to accept, I left the palace and stocked up on supplies at the local shops and guild hall. When ready, I popped open the world map and fast traveled directly over to Stone Keep. Stone Keep serves as an introductory dungeon to the game. It only has one level to it, and most of that level is completely optional to explore. For full transparency, even though I went through this one mostly blind, I was using maps and guides to make it through the following dungeons. Even so, I spent almost an hour in every single one, just trying to figure things out and attempting to defeat the more difficult monsters. Honestly, the most time-consuming part of the dungeon is the navigation portion. You walk 10 steps, get held down by an enemy for 5 to 10 seconds, then continue onwards and repeat the process. It's fun at first, but I'm not gonna lie, it gets pretty numbing by the 5th or so dungeon. By walking south along the main chamber, I encountered mostly rats and goblins. Occasionally, some wolves would pop out and I got butchered a few times by a lone minotaur. Through its design and various pop-up texts, it's revealed that Stone Keep used to be a well-manned and supplied fortress. However, it was lost to goblins some time ago. The southernmost part of the chamber holds a locked door, which is the part that's completely optional for this dungeon. The area that I needed to explore was on the western side. Heading through an unlocked doorway, I was brought to a room that contained 7 more chambers. The northwesternmost room had a hole in its western wall. For quite some time, I had no clue how to get to the other side. However, I eventually learned about long jumping and leapt my way over. Up until now was the easy part of the dungeon. From this point forward, things got pretty tricky. North of my current spot was a horde of skeletons. At lower levels, they weren't super easy to take out. Luckily though, I needed to travel southwest through the body of water, so they were completely avoidable. At its center was an island which contained the Queen's Parchment. The catch is that the island was heavily guarded by ghouls. Anytime I tried to pull up to it, or get near it for that matter, a ghoul would be waiting for me and I'd be handed a one-way ticket to Rhea Silmain. This part took me the longest to get past by far. I tried running past the ghouls, but no dice there. I tried standing my ground, but they were simply too powerful. I must have heard these ghouls moan and groan for what felt like half an hour. When I first came across them, I couldn't fathom what kind of creatures they actually were. Hey Gary, could you do your best ghoul impression for us?
A ghoul? Yeah, sure, I got you.
Oh, that was great, Gary, thanks. At this point, I thought the only way to get past them was by leveling up and getting stronger. So I left the dungeon in search of an easier one that I could train at. This was where I ended up stumbling onto a small fortune and treated myself to some health potions. There was an amazing commenter who said that I'd 100% need an ample supply of pots. I didn't think it'd be so soon, but lo and behold, here I am. For the rest of the game, I always made sure to carry upwards of 50 before delving into any dungeon. For now though, trying my luck with only 5, I actually managed to defeat the Island of Ghouls and snag the Queen's Parchment. Of course, when the player successfully fetches the quest item, the other half of the fun is leaving the dungeon. It's certainly not as bad as finding your way through the place, but it's still a little sketchy. You never know what kind of monster is going to pop out and send you straight to Aetherius. Interestingly, there's no confrontation between the player and Golthog the Dark. That's something that you'll come to notice as a bit of a pattern, but I'll get into it more later on. Traveling back to Riyadh and presenting the scroll to the Queen, she hopes that Golthog has been vanquished, even though he hasn't, but even so, she expresses her gratitude and marks Fang Lair on my map. Similar to Stone Keep, starting the crawl is as simple as opening the world map and fast traveling over. First, I met with the title card for Fang Lair. It reads, "You stand before the Dragon Gate of Fang Lair, humbled before its majesty. The dwarven hold seems abandoned long ago, its stone walls crackling with age and neglect. Somewhere within its dank depths lies the first piece of the Staff of Chaos." Fang Lair is where the multi-level dungeon is introduced. The Dwemer Hold has 2 levels, and the idea for the first one is that I need to get from the northeastern corner of the map all the way down to the ladder in the southwestern corner. The dark pits existed in the previous 2 dungeons, but the lair is where they become a necessity to use. While I've been attacked in them before, they end up becoming a bit of a safe haven. Most of the monsters were waiting for me in the tunnels above, so down here in the mine shafts, I was able to take a moment, reset, assess my gear, and continue the journey. Most of the enemies fought on this level were skeletons and spiders. Nothing too tricky to handle, but I just had to keep my eye on the health bar at all times. The occasional orc and minotaur would also pop up, and those would be a little trickier to deal with. Even though there isn't much in the way of lore inside of Fang Lair, we know through Rhea Silmain that a great worm drove out the dwarves. Even though it isn't specified, it's probably safe to say that the worm is long gone. After a lot of strenuous navigation, I finally landed on the desired chamber. Heading on in, the game displays a message saying that the nearby cells are housing hungry spiders. At the far end of the chamber is a dark portal. Approaching it, another message is displayed. I'm to answer a riddle correctly in order to receive further passage. If I get it wrong though, the spiders will be released. The riddle goes as follows. If cell 3 holds worthless brass, cell 2 holds the gold key. If cell 1 holds the gold key, cell 3 holds the worthless brass. If cell 2 holds the worthless brass, cell 1 holds the gold key. Knowing all that is said cannot be true, which cell contains the gold key? I'm not gonna lie, I read this riddle over and over, trying to rack my brain around it. It definitely went way over my head. I'm still unsure how the answer is cell 2. I even plugged it into ChatGPT to see if I was missing something, and even AI said try picking cell 1. So maybe that's the telltale sign that it's cell 2. Anyways, at the back of the second cell is a gold key which can be used to progress further into Fang Lair. The second level of the dungeon is a lot more straightforward than the first. It didn't take me very long to get to the central chamber, which contained the first piece of the Staff of Chaos. It's tucked away behind yet another door, which can also only be opened by the correct answer. The riddle goes, what is neither fish nor flesh, feathers nor bone, but still has fingers and thumbs of its own? My initial guess was a statue for some reason, but the correct answer is either glove or gauntlet. Behind the locked door is where I encountered my first hellhound. They're tough creatures and can cast very powerful fire spells. However, getting up in its face, I was able to hack and slash my way past it. Finally, I got my hands on the first staff fragment. A message display saying that it's eagerly awaiting reconnection with the other 7 pieces. Backtracking out of Fang Lair, that wraps up the second quest of the Elder Scrolls Arena's main questline. Returning to Rihad and resting at the inn for the night, I was visited by Rhea once again.
It seems that you are well chosen. I see that you have won the first piece of the staff. That in and of itself is not a simple task. Tharn, it seems, is not as concerned with you as I had thought he would be. Perhaps he thinks you dead or lost in the sewers from which you escaped. That is well, for I have discovered the second piece's location. There was once a great maze built by the Archmagus Shalador to guard what he called Glamour, the elven term for the secret of life. I know not the location of the great maze, which was called the Labyrinthian, but somewhere in its twisted corridors lies the second piece of the Staff of Chaos. Shalador, according to the old text, made his home in the Fortress of Ice. He would not have built the Labyrinthian far from his home. I would search to the north for such a place. I wish you well on your journey.
With that, it's time to rinse and repeat the same process for questing. Silmain gave me a pretty decent clue though. She said that the Labyrinthian could be found in an icy climate. After getting confirmation from an NPC, I packed my bags and fast traveled over to Whiterun in Skyrim. Arriving, it was nighttime and I wanted to wait for the citizens to come out of their homes. So I left the city limits and decided to set up camp. However, that night, I was visited by a stranger in my dreams.
I do not know who you are, but you have made a fatal mistake. Rhea Silmain and her feeble powers are no protection for you. I should have discorporated her when I had the chance. I will not make the same mistake again. I will use the same dream bridge that she uses, sending my minions across time and space, all ready to arrive. Ones worthy of the attention you deserve. They will relieve you of the burden of the staff piece you now hold. Give it to them, and I will order your death painless and quick. Resist, and I shall see you in such suffering that you will grovel for the sweet release of death.
Contrary to Silmane's words from before, it seems like I'm now on Jagartharn's radar. He knows that I'm collecting the pieces of the Staff of Chaos, and he's even sent hellhounds after me. Regardless, I have a mission that needs completing. Continuing my search, someone told me to check out the city of Winterhold, as strange things have been happening there. Doing so, I was then directed to the local Mages Guild. Having been burned by the temple and some inns, I was a little skeptical. However, to my delight, upon first contact, the wizard there opened up to me. He introduced himself as Thelen Karn, and knew that I was looking for the Labyrinthian. In exchange for a favor, he agreed to reveal its location. Sound familiar? Thelen explains that recently, a group of knights from the Fortress of Ice attacked a guild caravan. They ended up stealing a tablet that can decipher part of the elderscrolls. Said tablet is needed to complete the map that leads to the Labyrinthian. Therefore, both Karn and I need access to it. Agreeing to help, he marks the Fortress of Ice on my map. I stock up on potions and head out as soon as possible. Gone are the days of singular level dungeons. The Fortress of Ice is similar to Fang Lair in that it has 2 levels and that it's fairly maze-like. Luckily, there really isn't any need to delve into the dark pits and tunnels, at least on the first floor. Most of the enemies here are humans and ice wolves. While the latter can pack a punch with their ranged frost attacks, they themselves don't have that much health. Honestly though, the real problem comes from the ice golems. These giant freaks of nature hit really hard and have lots of health. Several guides suggest rolling in with at least an elven weapon, as anything below that can't hurt them. I personally got my teeth kicked in plenty of times trying to get past these things. My fingers were hovering over the U key, spamming my health potions over and over again. Also worth noting is that upon dying, I'm now visited by Tharn. He taunts me and says that he's going to have my character turn into an undead, which is just peachy. If you know the way around the first level, aka looking at a third-party map, or you've already done it, it doesn't take that long before you can reach the door leading to the second. There are pros and cons to this lower floor. The good side is that it's a little smaller than the first level, so it at least has that going for it. The downside though is that it takes a little more effort to get to the tablet. Introduced to the battle now are wolves and hellhounds. Again, if I successfully close the gap early on, the fights really aren't an issue. At this point too, I resume my travels through the dark pits in the ground. Again, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with them, as they offer a safe haven, but they do muddle up the navigation. Honestly, I wouldn't say there's anything else that's of great importance in the Fortress of Ice. After a lot of bloodshed and wrong turns, I landed on the door that blocked the way to Thelen's coveted tablet. The door hit me with yet another riddle, saying, "I touch your face, I'm in your words, I'm lack of space and beloved of birds. What am I?" My gut instinct was to go with wind, and it actually worked. On the other side, I was met with one final ice golem. Vanquishing it, I got access to treasure as well as the tablet. Exiting the Fortress of Ice, I returned to Winterhold and presented the artifact to Karn. Similar to how things were handled with Queen Bulbamka, Thelen marked the Labyrinthian on my world map. Wasting no time, I geared up and set off. Arriving, I was hit with yet another title card. It said, Labyrinthian. Stubborn grass and roots stand in the stiff Arctic climb, refusing to yield. Ahead of you stands the entrance to the Labyrinthian, testing grounds of the Archmagus Shalador. Within its twisted paths lies the second piece of the Staff of Chaos. I actually quite enjoyed my time in the Labyrinthian. I thought the way that it was laid out and the story that it told was quite fascinating. Upon entering, you're faced with 3 gates. The game tells you to go down the center one. More messages display as they help to set up the story of Canon the Elder and Mogris the Dim, 2 brothers who sought their fortune in the Labyrinthian, but instead met their untimely fates. The end of this tunnel holds a locked door. The displayed message mentions that Mogris the Dim holds the key for it. In order to get to Mogris, I need to venture beyond door number 1. Door number 1 ends up leading to the second floor. Luckily, it doesn't take a very long time to get to. Most of the enemies encountered here are spiders. While they're not fearsome foes, they do have a rather annoying ability to paralyze. It just adds a lot more time to each individual fight. Descending to the domain of Mogris, the hallways and tunnels are quite expansive and confusing. There are now dark pits and raised walkways that need to be used in order to reach the desired room. Creatures of all types could be found down here. Wolves, ghouls, wraiths, hellhounds, you name it. The name of the game here is to try and get to the northeastern chamber. Inside of it, there will be 2 cells. The northernmost cell contains the wraith of Mogris. Approaching it, he says, "I am Brother Mogris, the shade of this hall, cursed to its lengths from beginning to end. Find me the answer, and a door will I call. Fail me but once, and your heart I will rend. More beautiful than the face of your god, yet more wicked than a demon's forked tongue. Dead men eat it all the time, live men who eat it die slow." For some reason, my mind jumped to dirt, but that doesn't really make sense for the first half of the riddle. The correct answer, though, is nothing. Mogris accepts it and grants me access to the cell next to his. Inside of it is a diamond key. Returning to the middle cell in the first level, I unlocked a metal door and gained passage. However, I was quickly stopped by yet another blocked pathway. This time, surprise surprise, I was instructed to head down door number 2 in search of Canaan's Wraith. The way down from this side also didn't take a very long time to get to. Interestingly, the passages from both door 1 and door 2 lead down to the same level, they're just divided by a barrier. This makes it so you can't reach either side without going through their respective area. Similar to Mogris' domain, I started off in the central portion of the level, except this time it was on the eastern side. Canaan's cell is in the southwestern corner. Battling through more of the same monsters and hopping in between raised platforms and dark tunnels, I soon arrived at the chamber. Again, like Mogris' area, Canaan's Wraith was locked behind a cell. He said that I had to correctly answer the riddle, or I'd be stuck here with him for eternity. The question goes as follows. 2 bodies have I, though both joined in one. The more still I stand, the quicker I run. My mind immediately went to either time or a clock. I wasn't far off though, as the correct answer was an hourglass. The neighboring cell opened up and I managed to snag the sapphire key. Hauling it back to the first level and down the central tunnel, I unlocked the second metal door. Twisting around a few corners, I landed on the third and final door. This time though, instead of a key, I just had to answer one more riddle. The question goes, what force and strength cannot get through, I with a gentle touch can do. And many in these twisted halls would stand were I not as a friend at hand. Honestly, for this one I had no clue. I was thinking maybe some form of magic, but the correct answer ended up being key. Beyond the final metal door, I battled against a wraith and successfully retrieved the second piece of the Staff of Chaos. Luckily, from here, leaving the Labyrinthian is pretty simple, and I was able to quickly make my way back to Winterhold. Resting outside of the city limits, I was visited once more by Dagoth-Ur.
You have survived the tests most dire. Continue along this path, however, and you will face such things as to make your very heart freeze. I will save you the ordeal, for my servants approach you even now. From your mangled corpse, I will take what is mine.
After a brief threat from the Imperial Wizard, 2 rogues appear from the darkness and try to get the better of me. Fortunately, I'm well equipped to handle them, and I can continue to get a full night's rest.
I would congratulate you on retrieving the second piece of the Staff of Chaos, but dire portents have I seen. The third piece of the staff lies somewhere in the Elden Grove, ancient home of the elves. The Elden Grove is said to be the birthplace of the sacred first tree, that which gave life to all the forests on the continent of Tamriel. Its location has been a closely guarded secret, so guarded in fact that many believe that even the elves have forgotten its true location. Considering that there are only 3 provinces that hold any of the elfin people, your search should not be too difficult. Find the Elden Grove and recover the third piece of the staff. I wish you well on your quest.
Rhea Silmain directs me to the third fragment of the staff. She lays out 2 massive hints as to where it could be. Number 1 is that it's either in Valenwood, Somerset Isle, or Morrowind, the homes of the elves. Number 2 is that it's in a heavily forested area, where nature is held most sacred. Falsely taking a chance on the Somerset Isle, I asked around amongst the locals, and they insisted that it was in the wilderness of Valenwood. Picking the city of Falinesti at random and traveling over, I inquired further with the locals. They all pointed me in the direction of Eldenroot. It's pretty on the nose with its name and the Elden Grove. Finally, the people of Eldenroot told me that the queen of the city likely knows more. So, paying a visit to the royal palace, I had a little chat with Queen Ulandra. You can probably guess how it went. She explains that the grove is a sacred place to the Bosmer. In exchange for its location, Ulandra needs a favor. Illyrion, one of the city's lore masters, has been finding bodies of Eldenroot citizens sapped dry. They essentially become mere shells and need to be put down. 10 rangers left to find out what's been going on. Months later, their severed heads were delivered back to the city. It was seen as a message from someone named Selene, the high priestess of Shegrath, the god of spiders. She insists on threatening the entire province and its people if its leadership isn't handed over to her. Ulandra marks Selene's web, the high priestess's domain, on my map and asks me to return with her life force, a great jewel that's known as her heart. This will keep the god of spiders at bay. Accepting the deal, I readied myself and made way for Selene's web. The bulk of the enemies faced here are of course spiders. Similar to what I had to deal with in the Labyrinthian, the hallways are crawling with arachnids. Of course, it also has its fair share of other creatures: wolves, ghouls, wraiths, and the like. The first zone had me venturing from the northeast corner of the level to the central western area. Arriving at a metal door, the game displays a message saying that it's secured by a golden lock. Getting the hint, I began searching for the golden key. The key isn't actually too far from the entranceway. Meandering through the tight tunnels and walkways, I soon landed on a large open chamber that contained a body of water. Similar to Stone Keep, the key was placed on one of the platforms in the middle of the room. Each platform had its fair share of spiders, so I had my work cut out for me. On the northwesternmost island, the golden key was simply lying on the ground. Collecting it, I returned to the door and made my way into the second level of Selene's web. While the second level is larger and contains more than a few twisting tunnels, the pathway to get to the jewel is rather straightforward. Just south of the doorway, there's a long corridor that runs east to west. There's also a walkway that runs north to south, essentially dividing the level into quadrants. At its center is a door that's secured by a jewel-studded lock. The key for the lock is in the fourth quadrant. Traveling east and entering the bottom right sector, there are a series of rooms that I had to navigate through. Each room presented some sort of enemy that needed to be defeated. The lengthy part here though was picking which doorway to go through. Once I hit the final chamber, I leapt into an enclosed space within its center. There, I located the diamond key and was ready for the final part of the dungeon. Surrounding the room were wraiths and barbarians. While trying to leave, they gave me quite a lot of trouble. They were beating me up over and over until finally I was able to stand my ground. Returning to the central part of the zone and unlocking the door, I located the Heart of Selene, a massive jewel, and proceeded to exit the dungeon. I'll admit, I know that the bulk of this game is dungeon crawling, but the first dungeon for each quest has been quite lackluster. I found myself not really interested in them, which isn't good because they're so time consuming and make up half of the main quest. They use a combination of basic mechanics and a large layout. This just creates a time-consuming run and gun meets slasher type of scenario, which is struggling to capture my attention. In any case, back to the matter at hand, I returned to Queen Ulandra. She expressed her gratitude and marked the Elden Grove on my map. Readying myself, I fast traveled over and was met with this dungeon's title card. Elden Grove, the small overgrown entrance to the Elden Grove stands before you, guarding secrets forgotten for ages. Somewhere within its misty corridors lies the third piece of the Staff of Chaos. The Elden Grove is different from the previous dungeons. The first zone takes place outside, which is actually something I really enjoyed. It takes away from that tight, dark, claustrophobic feeling I got in the other ones. That being said though, it operates in the exact same way. Monsters and undead lurk at every corner, waiting for me to make a wrong turn. Interestingly, I felt as though the Elden Grove dungeon was the fastest one since Stone Keep. However, I was tightly following a third-party map which made navigation so much easier. The entrance of the first level is in the central west portion of the map. Heading south for a bit, then cutting east, I veered north for a brief distance, hit a sharp U-turn, and then landed at the next door. The second zone, while back to the normal enclosed underground adventure, was exceptionally straightforward. Walking west, I ended up at a body of water. Here, I was introduced to the boating mechanic. Hopping in, I was able to travel through the lakes and channels at a breakneck pace. Steering the boat north, I was able to avoid almost all enemy interactions. The boat fit perfectly under most platforms, and I made sure to steer clear of any islands or inlets that were sticking out. In the northwestern region of the zone, there was a larger island which I needed to dock at. Avoiding the wraiths and their fireballs, I interacted with the nearby door. I was then presented with the first riddle for this dungeon. It went, "My second is performed by my first, and it is thought a thief by the marks of my hole might be caught. Who am I?" Thinking the answer was footstep, that ended up being correct, and I was allowed passage inside of the room. Here, there were two wraiths that didn't take long to defeat. Along with those was, of course, the third piece of the Staff of Chaos. Attempting to leave the second zone, I was met with one more riddle as the way out of here was blocked. It went, "Elvish mithril and Argonian silver, crumble I can. But first, I improve all created by man. I devour all things, bird and beast, serfs and kings. Though my pace is even, men curse my speed, wishing I were lazier in their hour of need. I can creep and crawl, or rush, even fly. I am all thou hast. Tell me, who am I?" This one, I knew for sure that the answer was time. Escaping the second level, the rest of the way out of the Elden Grove was simple enough. Fast traveling back to Eldenroot, I made my way into an inn and rested for the night.
You have done well. I had thought you lost to me. The third piece of the staff is yours. Rumors have been whispered about in the Empire. I think Tharn senses that the pieces come together. You must take care to not be discovered by him. Your death would be most unpleasant. I have divined the location of the fourth piece of the staff. It lies in the halls of Colossus, a structure built to honor a race of giants, though none have been seen in the land for ages. It is said that the halls of Colossus sat perched on a cliff overlooking the Great Divide, which is along the southern edge of Tamriel. Perhaps the halls are near that coastline. I only wish I could offer you more. Fare thee well, my friend, and find this place for the sake of our loved ones.
At this point, even Rhea Silmain knows that I'm putting a lot of attention on myself. Jagar Tharn knows what I'm up to, but the more pieces of the staff I collect, the greater a threat I pose to the Battle Mage's plan. Speaking of which, after exiting the city, I set up camp, anticipating another visit from the fake Emperor.
Why do you choose to align against me, when it is obvious that I will destroy you? Even as each piece of the staff comes into your possession, it becomes easier to find. And I have done just that. Face my creatures if you dare! I am through toying with you!
Again, it's just more threats and more lackeys being sent over to me. However, who knows how far it'll go, and what manner of creature he'll send after me next. In any case, there are 5 more pieces of the staff that need to be collected, and time's ticking. Returning to the town, I began asking around for the halls of Colossus. The first NPC I tried told me that strange things had been happening near elsewhere, and I knew exactly what that meant. Traveling over to the city of Corinth in the province of the Khajiit, I continued my search. However, I really lucked out, as again, the first person I spoke with spilled out some vital lore. They confirmed that Corinth was the place to be. Apparently, the Mages Guild and a group called the Priests of Agamanus declared war on one another. The reason being is that the priests got their hands on something that could lead to the halls of Colossus. Navigating my way over to the Mages Guild, I went on inside and spoke with the lore master, Turamain ap Kolthus. Turamain welcomes me and explains the situation. He knows that I'm searching for the halls and offers to make a deal. A couple of days ago, the priests of Agamanus attacked the guild, claiming that the wizards had stolen a stone tablet from them. In truth, the guild had recovered the tablet from some abandoned ruins, and Turamain theorizes that their leader, Sir Galandir, knows the importance and true nature of said tablet. Of course, as per usual, the tablet holds the location to the halls of Colossus. Surprising, right? Ab Kolthus asks me to head over to the temple of Agamanus and retrieve the tablet, all in exchange for the hall's location. Gearing up, I popped open the map and set out for the dungeon. Upon arrival, I was immediately jumped by 3 knights in full suits of armor. Nothing too crazy to handle, but it was definitely a cheap shot thrown in by the game. They're trying to keep me on my toes. I'm not gonna lie, after the series of Valenwood dungeons, I was kind of dreading heading back into another one. The dungeons are just getting longer and longer, and they feel less rewarding as time goes on. It just feels like I'm a cog in a machine, going through the motions of fetching these items, destined to repeat the process forever. I will say though, sometimes the staff of Chaos Dungeons are clever and offer new mechanics, which we'll soon get to see. Those ones bring some life back into the main quest for me. At first, they rack my brain a bit, but after a while, I start to have some fun with them, which is supposed to be what it's all about. Returning to the task at hand, the Temple of Agamanus is the first 3-level dungeon that I've had the pleasure of going through. As of right now, the game is a bit forgiving in the sense that if there is a tri-level dungeon, each zone is rather small and somewhat easy to get through. Again, just for full transparency, I'm running through all these dungeons with third-party maps open, courtesy of the Elder Scrolls fandom. Some of the maps have direct routes laid out for you to follow, and others just offer a complete view of the surrounding area. If you enjoy the challenge of blindly navigating through the dungeons, then by all means, no map needed. After all, the guessing game is half the fun for these areas, or at least that's how it was back in the day. However, these maps can greatly cut down on crawling time, and offer the most direct approach to progressing in the main story. Albeit, I was still in these dungeons for 40 plus minutes, so either way, prepare for the long haul. One thing I've really enjoyed thus far for Arena are the small hits of lore that the player receives. During the first portion of each quest, the player has to help out one of the town's factions by fetching something out of the local dungeons. Often, the quest giver will offer some sort of information regarding the relationships, tensions, and motives to the rivaling faction that wronged them. Take, for example, the Temple of Agamanus. Its leader is someone named Sir Galandir, and he seems to have a vested interest in the halls of Colossus. While it seems like that's as far as the lore goes, there are inscriptions, plaques, and general messages that the game relays to the player. For example, you learn that Sir Galandir is no longer in the temple. There's a note on a knight's body that instructs the temple to hold the fortress until he returns. There are other writings saying that some unpleasant rituals were meant to take place here. Finally, through a specific message, you learn that, since Galandir's departure, the fortress has fallen to ruin and chaos, hence all of the monsters that have gathered here. On the final level of the temple, I had gotten myself stuck in a bit of a tricky spot. It was honestly really frustrating. A common bug with this game is that if you're swimming and there's an enemy overhead, it hard blocks you from moving forward. If you're lucky, you can move backwards and try to find another route. Otherwise, you'll just sort of tread water and get whack-a-moled. I was probably stuck here for 10 or so minutes. The tablet was so close too, but I just couldn't do anything about it. So, backtracking to the second zone and then retracing my steps through the third, I learned that the key was to Michael Phelps' full speed, no stop swim right on through. This way, whatever's above you can't move to the platform in time to block your path. It was irritating to deal with, but after some trial and error, I got past it. The final puzzle for the dungeon was of course a riddle. It went, I daily am in Elsewhere and in Skyrim. At times do all the world explore. Since time began, I've held my reign, and shall till time is nevermore. I never in my life have strolled in garden, field, or park. Yet all of these are sad and cold if I'm not there, and it is dark. This one wasn't too tricky for me personally, as the sad, cold, and dark part tipped me off to write sun. Recovering the tablet, I left the temple and returned it to Turamain at the Mages Guild. With it, he was able to inscribe the location of the Halls of Colossus on my map. Traveling over, I met with its title card, which reads, You stand before the gigantic walls of the Halls of Colossus, built by giants in an age long past. The wind echoes mournfully through the empty battlements. Here lies the fourth piece of the Staff of Chaos. Now, before I mentioned that the staff dungeons were able to get a little bit creative, and this is where that statement rings true. There are 3 levels to this dungeon. However, the idea is that the player mostly ventures through the first one. This zone contains 7 different keys, and they're all scattered. Each key is needed to progress through the second zone. The second zone consists of one gigantic room that's filled with rats. In that room, there are 8 different doorways, 1 on the western wall, 1 on the eastern, 3 on the northern, and 3 on the southern. The north and south doors are how you navigate to the different areas of the dungeon. The eastern one leads you back out into Tamriel, while the western one is what brings you to the third zone. I actually really like this concept. It's creative, it's new, and it helps the modern day player, aka myself, to fully explore the dungeon. Now, in the beginning, upon first entry, for a good long while, surprise surprise, I was stuck. All of the doors that I needed to progress through were locked. All of the keys were on the other side of said doors, so how on Mundus was I supposed to open them? Up until now, approximately halfway through the game, I had no clue that was a mechanic. There were locked doors in every single dungeon, and I just assumed you needed some lockpick, key, or spell to get past them. So with that feature now out in the open, the rest of the navigation wasn't so bad. Securing all 7 keys, I went down into the second level and unlocked 5 doors. If you really wanted to, you could unlock a door after each key is obtained, but it's probably just simpler to bang them all out at the same time. Left over are the 2 amethyst keys, although those are used on the first couple of doors in the 3rd zone. Shortly into the final level, I came across a door which was only accessible via the correct answer. The question was, I am the architect of this hell, whose name is forgot in the dust of time. Yet, where there is no dust, where the river would speak, there is my name. Find this place and then return to tell me my name. Only then shall you pass this door. What is my name? Now, there's a chamber in the first zone that's easy to miss. It's not far from the Sapphire Key in the southeastern corner. There, in the flooded area, you'll come across an inscription that simply says, Theodorus. This is the correct answer for the question. After that, there's another door which poses yet another question for the player. I am twice as old as 3 times the age of the Sphinx of Gazia, Agamemnus, divided by 1/9 the age of the Sphinx of Canis, Egon, who left this world 26 years ago. What then is my age? At first, I had no clue. I had never read up on any lore of the Sphinxes or their creation. However, the wiki simplifies it and tells you to, quote, use the sum of the index of letters in the alphabet for the age of each name. In doing so, Agamemnus gives you 90. Multiply that by 3 and then by 2, you get 540. Now, switching to Egon, you get a sum of 45. Divided by 9 equals 5, then if you do 540 divided by 5, that gets you 108, which is the answer for the door. Yeah, I probably wasn't getting that on my first, second, or third try. In any case, in the center of the room is the 4th piece of the Staff of Chaos. Retrieving it is as simple as running to the center of the chamber and then booking it out of there. There were a lot of tough, ranged monsters that were easily avoidable by just skipping right past them. Leaving the halls of Colossus was pretty simple, and returning to Corinth, I rested outside of its walls in order to trigger some visions.
You have recovered the 4th piece. I honor your bravery. Listen closely now, my friend, for Tharn has begun in earnest to look for you. Do not fear. He does not know your true identity, but he can sense the staff's power. With 4 of the 8 pieces, you stand out like a lantern at night. I urge you to caution. The 5th piece of the staff lies in an ancient stronghold of sorcery called the Crystal Tower. It was said that the southern tip of the Dragon's Teeth, which stretches from the ice-covered mounts of High Rock to the wooded forests of Valenwood, could be seen on the horizon from the top parapet of the tower. This would lead me to believe it is not far south of the majestic mountain range. You must find the tower and gain access to recover the 5th piece of the Staff of Chaos.
It is obvious, whoever you are, that you are a cunning and worthy foe. Perhaps Rhea chose well, even if it was her last act. I will not insult your intelligence with further diversion. My minions soon approach, but I will not consign you to the dark door of death. You have proven your worth. Once you are killed, I will raise you to fight for me as one of my servants. Give him to me now, and I offer you everlasting life.
It didn't really sink in the first time I heard it, but listening back, Rhea gave me a huge hint as to which province I should look into next. Confirming my suspicions via a rumor, I left elsewhere and traveled to Somerset Isle, the closest unexplored province to the southern tip of Valenwood. Asking around in Cloudrest, I was directed to the city of Lilandril. Speaking with another citizen, they informed me of the tensions between the Mages Guild and the followers of, quote, the Mad God. Heading to the guild hall, I spoke with its lore master, Coram Ashlin. Coram elaborated further on the Crystal Tower and the priests of the Mad God. Many of his students have searched their entire lives for the tower, yet have not found it. However, Coram offers me a deal. He'll help me look for it if I recover a small diamond from the priests of the Mad God. The priests sacked the guild hall and ran off with it. The diamond not only helps to strengthen the guild's powers, but it can also reveal the way to the Crystal Tower. Accepting the deal, he marks the Temple of the Mad God on my map, and I set off for my next adventure. This dungeon was honestly a breath of fresh air. It was the one that probably took me the least amount of time to get through, including the first one ever, Stone Keep. The first zone has the player off in the northeastern corner of the map. Through some simple traversing, meandering south and then west through each corridor, I was able to make it to the second zone in no time. In terms of lore, there really isn't any here. I'd assume that the Mad God is the Daedric Prince, Sheogorath, but it also seems like Arena was rather ambitious with its deities, divines, and entities. There are a lot of strange beings, titles, and factions that get thrown around. Like for example, Selene, the god of spiders. Is that supposed to be Mephala, or just some sorceress named Selene who can control spiders? Really, the only message displayed in the temple is that the treasure has been moved to another section, but that really only affects how you navigate through this level. Speaking of which, getting through the second zone is as simple as wandering through the northern hallways and veering east towards the end. I'd probably say for this dungeon that less than 1/3 is actually necessary to explore. Just before the room with the diamond, there's of course a door with a riddle. It goes, what flares up and does a lot of good, and when it dies is just a piece of wood. My initial thought was a mage's staff. However, staves are quite different in this game compared to Oblivion and Skyrim. The correct answer though was torch. Snagging the diamond in record time, I had begun my escape when all of a sudden, I came across a brand new enemy. Robocop had taken a new form in the Elderscrolls, an iron golem. This thing was big, it hit hard and had lots of health. What's more, I couldn't even attack it. This was my first encounter with an enemy that couldn't be touched by anything that was below mithril grade. I was currently wielding an Elven Warhammer, the best weapon that I had come across thus far. Elven is 2 levels below mithril, the next one up being Dwarven, which as I just mentioned, I hadn't seen once in the game yet. This got me a little worried for what was to come. Realizing I couldn't do anything here, I tucked my tail and successfully fled the dungeon. Arriving back in Lilandril, I returned the diamond to Coram at the guild hall. Holding up his end of the bargain, he revealed the location of the Crystal Tower. Restocking on some potions, I popped open the map and started my journey for staff piece number 5. Arriving at the tower, the title card read, "The Crystal Tower dominates the area, rising like an accusatory finger pointing at the sky above. This bastion of sorcery seemingly transcends normal human conceptions, existing in many planes other than this. You can sense the 5th piece of the Staff of Chaos somewhere above." The Crystal Tower is the first dungeon, so far, that has 4 levels to it. Again, it's not even so much navigating through each zone. It's the thought of having to retrace my steps back out through all 4 levels. It never ends up being that bad either, but for some reason, mentally, it just seems like such a tall task. Like I'm traveling through 8 zones. The first one was a pretty quick crawl though. I mostly meandered north, veering into some separate chambers, turning east or west at the appropriate times. Most of the enemies faced here were trolls, and I ended up learning the hard way how they operate. Unless destroyed by magic, the trolls essentially just get knocked out if they're being attacked with regular weapons. For my Nord warrior, this meant the best I could do for now is to book it past them. Knocking them down doesn't even offer any experience points, so I was pretty much just wasting my time. Entering the second zone, the crawl also went by really quickly. Starting in the northeastern corner, I traveled south to the level center. Turning west and entering a small room, I followed the corridor until I reached zone number 3. The enemies weren't abundant and taking them out was pretty simple. Now, the third level is where things got interesting. This is described as a bestiary, or rather, a holding area for all manner of creatures. Apart from a few trolls in the hallways, the rest of the enemies were locked inside of their cells. I didn't dare venture into them, even though I probably could have handled it. I just didn't want to stray too far away from my objective, and I saw it as a win with the bulk of my enemies locked up. At the very end of Zone 3, there are 2 final cells. Approaching the first, the game says that it's empty and that it has my name etched into it. Something here has been expecting me. I thought that was a really nice little touch. As for the second one, it warned me about a fire demon, yet another enemy that I've yet to face. Try my luck, similar to the Iron Golem, my Elven Warhammer was completely ineffective. Going on my walk of shame, I ran right past the demon and into the fourth and final zone. This level requires the player to explore almost all of it. It takes you counterclockwise from the southeastern corner all the way to the southwestern corner. Luckily, most of the enemies here were ice wolves, and at this point in the game, they're unable to do much to my character. Finally, reaching a locked doorway, I was presented with this dungeon's riddle. In a marble hall as white as milk, lined with skin as soft as silk, within a fountain crystal clear, a golden apple doth appear. No doors there are to the stronghold, yet thieves break in to steal the gold. Honestly, zero clue. I think I initially thought of a palace or something of the sorts. As it would turn out, the correct answer is egg. After defeating some wraiths, I snagged the fifth piece of the Staff of Chaos and then hightailed it out of the Crystal Tower. Even with this dungeon, I was in and out in around 30 minutes, which was amazing by my standards. Traveling back to Lilandril, I camped outside of the city gates in order to receive my next set of visions.
I have underestimated you, that is clear. You not only have defeated the useless creatures I have sent against you, but managed to survive encounters that in and of itself could be the stuff of legends. It is sad that I am forced to destroy you. Prepare, for my minions arrive.
Tharn only sent 2 knights, which really weren't that hard to take out. Continuing my rest, I waited on word from Silmain.
It has become a habit, congratulating you on your success. Still, there are 3 pieces left, and what guards them only the Divine Lady may know. I have spent many a day searching the ethereal plane for some clue as the location of the 6th piece of the staff. This is what I have found. The piece was sent to a place called the Crypt of Hearts. I have no clue as to the location of such a place. The price for the little knowledge I have was exacting. Still, only 3 provinces remain that can hold these last pieces. It can only lie in one of these. Good luck.
The final 3 provinces are High Rock, Morrowind, and Blackmarsh. For some reason, Rhea doesn't count Cyrodiil. However, there's likely a very good reason for that. A reason that we'll see in just a few quests. Quickly, before embarking on the next adventure, I went ahead and purchased an adamantium daikatana. According to the wiki, this is the 2nd best material for basic weapons. It's right behind ebony gear, which was slightly out of my price range. However, with this blade, golems and fire demons should no longer be an issue. Asking around amongst some of the NPCs, they told me that the Crypt of Hearts was located somewhere in High Rock. With the province narrowed down, I traveled to the city of Shornhelm and inquired from there. This is where I was quickly sent over to Camlorn. From Camlorn, I was shooed over to a temple called the Brotherhood of Seth. Again, where these factions come from and what they're based off of is beyond me. Locating a priest of Seth, he of course didn't quite divulge the information that I needed. Hafis Varn tells me the story of Brother Barnabas, a senior member whom apparently went mad. He rambled on about how the Emperor had been captured and that the Staff of Chaos was needed in order to rescue him. Hafis calls it lunacy, but I was standing opposite of him and smiling and nodding. Barnabas ended up going berserk and murdered another member of Seth. He then took off to a place called the Mines of Curis. On his way out, he took the only scroll that can help decipher the true location of the Crypt of Hearts. In exchange for the crypt's whereabouts, I'm to return the scroll to Brother Hafis. The Mines of Curis is only a 2-level dungeon, which is certainly a sight for sore eyes. Of course though, there's always a give and take, as the 2 zones are humongous. The mines' claim to fame, at least for the first level, is that it's overflowing with pits and lakes of lava. Even the designs of the walls show wear and tear from the magma and ash. As for enemies, it's a mishmash of spiders, skeletons, hellhounds, etc. A little bit of everything that I've seen in the dungeons prior. While I never encountered them, the wiki calls attention to some messages that were seemingly left behind by Brother Barnabas. He talks about how the Emperor's minions are waiting for him and that the secret of the staff is his. It looks like he's going to write more, but his words are suddenly cut off. The second zone only requires the player to explore about a fifth of it. Again though, it's a massive area and the halls twist, turn, and act like a maze. There's a lack of lava on this level, which is nice, but it gets made up for with its fair share of dark pits and tunnels. The most notable enemies down here were iron golems. Fighting with them sort of acted like a rematch from the Temple of the Mad God, except this time I was actually able to hit them and bring them down. Unlike most of the other dungeons, there are no riddles or keys involved at all with the Mines of Curus. At the end of the line, there's a small room that contains the scroll, as well as the body of Brother Barnabas. This honestly might be one of the few times, if not the only time, where the subject of the actual quest is present in the dungeon. Quite some time ago, I mentioned that you never get to encounter the big bad boss of the opposing faction, Golddog, Selene, Sir Galandir, etc. The leaders of the groups who either stole some artifacts or threatened the palace of their respective cities. Barnabas's dead corpse might be the only time I've had proper closure for one of the quote-unquote appetizer dungeons. That leads me into my next point. There really isn't much in the way of bosses or even mini-bosses for any of these dungeons. At most, you can maybe consider the fire demon from the Crystal Tower, but it's not really unique. It would have been neat to see either those leaders or just plain members of those factions guarding the artifacts that need to be fetched. Of course, it's an old game, times have changed and I can't complain that much, but more so a secondary thought. Returning to Camlorn and bringing the scroll to Brother Hafis, he expresses his gratitude, comments on my resilience, and best of all, shows me where the Crypt of Hearts is. Setting off for the next staff fragment, I met with this dungeon's title card. The chill of death seems to touch your heart as you gaze upon the stone walls of the Crypt of Hearts. Above the entrance stands a grinning skull, a warning to those who would traverse the halls of the dead. You can sense the sixth piece of the Staff of Chaos somewhere below. While the Mines of Curus only had 2 levels, the crypt brings it back to 4. The first zone is the largest, however, you only need to venture through the upper right quadrant of the map. While the path I took was pretty quick, looking at the fandom's map a second time, there's actually an even faster route to the second level. From the entrance, you can simply travel west the whole way there. Now, as for Zone 2, while it is smaller, there's more travel time, as I was taken around the entire level. Probably the most difficult enemies here are homunculi, these demonic flying creatures that have a pretty damaging ranged attack. Throughout the dungeon, you get a pretty good idea of what the Crypt of Hearts was originally used for. There's plenty mention of death and rotten smells. The walls have strange inscriptions and drum beats can be heard from the crypt's bowels. Messages speak of human sacrifice and chambers blocked off by large and heavy stones. It's clear that something was either killing or being killed for here, and that something was powerful and feared. The wiki makes mention of a vampire lurking through the first level of the crypt. According to the wiki, vampires are the second most powerful enemy in the game. Whether or not this is the entity that's to be feared is unknown. However, the more I play through Arena, the more I realize that most of these messages are meant for setting the atmosphere. They're intended to build upon the game's lore without actually delivering said threat. It's not a bad thing as we learn more about the universe, but I've just come to take those messages with a grain of salt. The fourth and final zone of the Crypt of Hearts is where things got really challenging. The game formally introduces me to stone golems. The wiki places them in between their ice and iron counterparts, but I think they're the toughest of the bunch. They pack a mean punch with their ranged attacks and took a good long while to vanquish with my Daikatana. There was a small stretch here where I genuinely didn't know how to proceed. They were stationed on small perches that covered an entire area of dark tunnels. I couldn't go below as I was rendered defenseless and got blasted with their magic. Going above, I had to slowly and meticulously fight through them. I died a bunch of times and potions were flying out of my inventory. Finally, I got past that part, worked my way over to the final chamber, and faced the one and only riddle this dungeon had to offer. It went, there is a thing which nothing is, yet it has a name. It's sometimes tall and sometimes short. It tumbles when we fall, it joins our sport, and plays at every game. I was for some reason thinking gravity. Things go up, they come down. It's a thing, but isn't tangible. It also plays a factor in games and sports. The real answer, though, was shadow. Waiting for me on the other side were 2 fire demons. I guess at this point, this is the most boss-like fight I've gotten to experience. They were tough, and I burned through a lot of potions, but at the end of the day, potions win fights. Retrieving the 6th piece of the Staff of Chaos, I made my way out of the Crypt of Hearts and over to Shornhelm. Resting outside the city walls, I was once again visited by Rhea Silmain.
Tharn is livid, scattering about the Imperial Palace like a rabid dog. You have caused him no end of worry. I am sure the wizard's minions are tracking you. I will say no more, lest I tempt fate. You seek now the 7th piece of the Staff of Chaos. I have found that this piece lies in a place called Murkwood, the dark forest that ever moves. There can only be one of 2 provinces left that can hold this forest, Black Marsh or Morrowind. I would start my search in one of these.
I have a good feeling I know which of the 2 provinces Murkwood is in, but first, it was time for a visit from Dagoth-Ur.
You have rejected my offer of everlasting life. Your list of accomplishments grow. You will not, however, accomplish the forging of the staff. My forces are inexhaustible, and you will succumb. Prepare, for my servants arrive.
Dealing with a single rogue, all that lies ahead of me now are the 2 missing staff pieces and a confrontation with the Imperial Battle Mage. Running back into town, I cornered the first NPC I saw and asked about Murkwood. They confirmed my suspicion and said to check out the swampy province of Blackmarsh. Traveling to Blackrose, I continued my search until finally, someone told me to look into the city of Stormhold. The locals there mentioned that a faction known as the Conclave of Baal might know the dungeon's location. However, the NPC thinks it'll be hard to pry it out of them. Already knowing how these things go, I located the Conclave and spoke with its leader, Eidolon Lancaster. Lancaster informed me of the faction's recent mishap. One of their initiates cast a powerful spell in an attempt to impress the higher-ups. The spell was uncontrollable, and the best the elders could do to dissipate it was by sending it straight down into the earth. This ended up collapsing the surrounding area, which at the time were the vaults of Gemin. Many artifacts were lost, including a tablet that's needed to locate Murkwood. Lancaster asks me to retrieve said tablet in exchange for information on the dungeon. The Vaults of Gemin is your classic 2-level dungeon. The first area is rather large, and there are a lot of little rooms and chambers that you can easily wander into. I started in the central northern part of the map and had to work my way down to the zone center. Luckily, most of the travel time is spent wandering down one long hallway. Once I reached the edge of the corridor, I just had to cross through a few rooms before hitting the entrance to level 2. You'll see it as the dungeons go on, but I was starting to have a really tough time facing off against casters. Homunculi, hellhounds, and wraiths in particular were giving me some serious problems. They were almost always in groups of 2, and just spaced out enough to where my attacks wouldn't be able to land on both of them. I got pretty bold after completing the last few dungeons with very few deaths, so much so that I had got into the habit of saving less frequently. Well, during this particular adventure, it was safe to say that I had my confidence squashed back down. In terms of lore for the Vaults of Gemin, there really aren't any messages or notes left around from the game. What's more, almost all of the dungeons in Arena can be discovered and explored in future installments of the series. They're pretty much all accessible in ESO. However, the vaults are completely absent from every other title, so really, they were created with Arena and also taken down with it. The second level of the vaults was a real pain in the neck. It was a large flooded chamber with several decently sized islands connected to one another. Scattered around the outskirts of those islands on their own little perches were stone golems. They were excellent shots and could knock my health down in no time. Again, it seemed like most of the enemies here were spellcasters, including more wraiths and homunculi. They definitely did a good number on my character. After hacking and slashing my way through, I finally made it to the magically sealed door. It presented me with a riddle, which read, "I come out of the earth, I am sold in the market. He who buys me cuts off my tail, takes off my suit of silk, and weeps beside me when I am dead." This one actually came to me pretty quickly, as the tail and weeping part gave it away. The answer was onion. Inside of the small chamber were 2 more wraiths, a small pile of treasure, and of course, the tablet. Securing it and making my escape from the vaults of Gemin, I traveled back to Stormhold. Presenting the tablet to Eidolon Lancaster, he remarks at how the vaults have fallen to dark forces, but in any case, he's content with the artifact's retrieval. Using the tablet, he's able to show me the exact location of Murkwood. Wasting no time, I traveled on over and was met with its title card. It read, "The mists of Murkwood, the black forests swirl about. Inside the dark forests can be heard faint cries of despair, souls who have lost their way within its cunning web. Though the smell of decay flows from every tree and stone, within this forest lies the seventh piece of the Staff of Chaos." The crawl through Murkwood was officially my fastest time in and out of any given dungeon. I was able to secure the staff fragment in under 20 minutes, which for me was unheard of. Murkwood is a 2-level dungeon, which at this point in the game feels quite strange to see. The first zone is rather unique. Similar to the Elden Grove, it takes place outside. The catch though is that the area is massive and most of it is open and barren, meaning that without a third-party map, I'm betting it's really easy to get lost in here. The center is where you can find the doorway to the second level. That little central section though is a mess of tight walkways. It creates a somewhat intricate maze that the player needs to navigate through. In terms of enemies, really there weren't that many here, at least compared to other dungeons. Periodically there were fire demons, wraiths, or wolves, but they weren't very frequent. However, I did formally get introduced to the Medusa. They're certainly one of the more powerful foes in the game. 2 of them were bunched up, and together they created what felt like an unstoppable force. One would paralyze me while the other would lunge in for the attack. However, the difference between their paralysis and, let's say, a spider's is that the Medusas never went away. At least I never survived long enough to see it go away on its own. Potions of free action were a necessity for facing off against them, and even so, nothing was stopping the Medusae from letting off another spell right after. They certainly gave me some trouble, but eventually I was able to best them and head for the nearby locked gate. I needed to correctly answer this riddle in order to get past it. I tie and hold, capture and bind, yet both knights and knaves doth crave me. I faithfully enslave all within my grasp, whether or not they seek me. Yet those who have never felt my unmerciful hand are pitied by their fellow man. Initially, I was thinking of a sheath. I thought of a sword being bound, held, and stayed by a knight. As it would turn out though, the answer is love. The second level of Murkwood was honestly way too easy, but considering I was getting dungeon fatigue, there were no complaints from me. It was a small chamber that held several locked cells. Behind each one of them was an iron golem. At the back of the room was a singular locked door. Approaching it, the game presented me with yet another riddle. I run smoother than any rhyme, I love to fall but cannot climb. I tremble at each breath of air, and yet can heaviest burdens bear. It's safe to say that I'm not nailing too many of these riddles, as my first guess was singing, or song. The answer for this one though, was water. If I had typed in the wrong answer, then an iron golem would be released from one of the cells. At the back of the previously locked chamber was the 7th piece of the Staff of Chaos. Snagging it, I successfully fled Murkwood and made my way back to Stormhold. Resting in the wilderness, I triggered my vision from Dagoth-Ur.
You amaze me with your tenacity. This game, however, is at an end, as you may already know. The final piece of the staff is in Dagoth-Ur, in the province of Morrowind. The information is useless to you, for none know the entrance to the volcano, and even if you survive the creatures I have sent against you now, you will not survive its depths. I bid you farewell. You have been a most worthy opponent.
Thorn really isn't sending his best after me, as all I encountered here was a lone rogue. Once ready, I rested again and received my last vision from Rhea Silmain.
I would take no chances, for Tharn has no mercy and will attack the moment he perceives the staff reassembled. You must be swift. To the northeast lies the Fire Mountain, Dagoth-Ur. Somewhere in its volcanic depths is the final piece of the Staff of Chaos. The entrance to that fabled mountain has disappeared with the dwarves that mined it. There may still be those who know of it, however. Find the entrance, enter the volcanic catacombs, and return with the final piece of the staff. We are so close. I wish you well.
From my time playing through Morrowind, I more or less knew where the entrance to Dagoth-Ur was. However, I of course had to go through the motions with Arena. Traveling to the island of Vardenfell, more specifically to the town of Stoneforest, I asked around for more information. The first NPC I spoke with said to check in at the city of Ebonheart. In doing so, someone told me that the palace might have records of Dagoth-Ur and its entrance. Stumbling into the court and speaking with King Kasich, he offered me a deal. Apparently, there's a fabled hammer called the Hammer of Garen. When combined with the Anvil of Mythos, a blacksmith has the ability to create some of the finest weapons and armor in all of the land. What's more, the ringing of the hammer on the anvil is what reveals the location of Dagoth-Ur. By recovering the hammer from a place called Blackgate, I'll be able to gain some knowledge on the final dungeon. Continuing the trend, Blackgate is a bi-level dungeon, and of course, those 2 levels are massive in size. However, the navigation through this dungeon is actually pretty straightforward. I started off in the northeastern corner and worked my way over to the center. After traveling south from the start and crossing through a few rooms, I ended up in a channel of water. That channel was able to take me all the way to the middle of the zone, and what's more, I didn't encounter a single enemy on the swim over. However, after making landfall, the wraiths and the homunculi were extra destructive. I guess they were making up for the lack of action in the waterways. After stumbling on into the second zone, I was immediately met with a magically sealed door. Of course, I was long overdue for a riddle. This one went, "What is the thing which comes in sheets yet cannot be folded or gathered again?" Honestly, I really wasn't sure. For fun, I wanted to go with metal, even though I knew it was wrong. The correct answer here was rain, which, thinking on it, I had heard of rainfall being referred to as sheets maybe once or twice before. Ultimately though, I wasn't getting that one right. Zone 2 for Blackgate is actually pretty interesting. The hammer is located in the southwestern section of the level. I popped out just north of it. However, in order to gain access to the room it's in, I need to secure one of 3 keys. There are ruby, emerald, and sapphire keys scattered throughout the dungeon. The former 2 are pretty far from the hammer and require some extensive navigation. However, if you're lucky, the sapphire key can spawn in right by the sealed doorway. According to the wiki, there's an iron golem stationed by the room that drops the key when it dies. However, it's a pretty common bug for the key to simply not drop, and the price of that is more time spent in this dungeon trying to find the other 2 keys. Certainly not the end of the world, but it's nice having that option of convenience. After defeating the Iron Guardian, I must have had a 4-leaf clover in my pocket, as Robocop Reincarnate dropped the key. Gaining access to the room, I was met with another Iron Golem, as well as a Fire Demon. Blackgate was throwing its best at me, but I've been able to hold my ground thus far. After successfully obtaining the Hammer of Garen, I hightailed it out of the dungeon. At this point, given the enemies that I'm facing and their abilities, it's almost just as tricky to leave these places as it is to enter them. I used to be able to run right out of each zone, but now there are casters placed everywhere just waiting for me to turn the corner. Returning to Ebonheart and giving the legendary hammer to King Kasich, he was ecstatic and immediately began using it. Hitting the anvil, he learned where the entrance to Dagoth-Ur was and inscribed it on my map. At this point, I was excited yet nervous. The final piece of the Staff of Chaos was right there, but I knew that this was going to be some of the finest dungeon crawling that Arena had to offer. And boy was I right. Stocking up on regular potions, potions of heal true, potions of free action and cure disease, I readied myself and made way for Dagoth-Ur. Arriving, I was met with its title card. The sacred entrance of the Dwarven Smiths into the Fire Mountain, Dagoth-Ur stands before you. Magical runes glow in the red firelight, shimmering with heat. Sulphurous gouts of steam escape from vents within the rock face of the opening. The final piece of the Staff of Chaos beckons. Dagoth-Ur brings things back to a tri-level dungeon. The first level is fairly straightforward. I spawned in at the northeastern corner of the map and had to travel to the central western part. The crawl took me on a direct path that literally had me zigging west and zagging south. Probably less than a third of the map was actually necessary to go through. Although, I will say, the ease of navigation was offset by the difficulty of the enemies. What's more, the first zone wasn't even the worst of it, as level 2 had some of the toughest enemies found in the game. This area employed the same gimmick as the halls of Colossus. Right by the entrance, there are 5 locked doors. Each door is opened by a different key. Those keys are placed all around the level. There's one in the center and one in every corner of the map. If you have Pass Wall or the Skeleton Key, this zone is over in less than 20 seconds, and Dagoth-Ur might be one of the easiest dungeons for you to crawl through. Otherwise, if you're a regular old warrior like myself, it's time to run the gauntlet. The first key I went for was the ruby one up in the northwestern corner. This was one of the simpler fights, as all that was guarding it was an iron golem. Honestly, the most difficult part was platforming over to the island. Platforming, jumping around, leaping for my life, those were never really mechanics in the game up until now, and Zone 3 brings them to a whole new level. Without jumping ahead though, it was on to the diamond key, which was in the central chamber. Technically, this was the most difficult key to obtain, as its guardian was a lich. I had never faced one before and wasn't sure what to expect. Apart from their creepy look and their horrific sound, the fight wasn't too bad. It took me a really long time to vanquish it, and I did go through more than a few health potions, but at least it couldn't paralyze me. Not to mention, a lot of its hits were not landing. Maybe that part was a fluke, but I've learned to take the small victories wherever I could. The next key had me venturing up to the northeastern corner of the map. Compared to the last one, this fight was like a breath of fresh air. A simple hop over the lava stream and a tussle with a fire demon. Nothing too difficult, and the sapphire key was a quick grab. With only 2 left, I wandered down to the southeastern corner and faced off against the second most powerful, non-unique enemy in the game, a vampire. I was surprised with how tall this thing was. The NPCs in the game are gigantic to begin with, but this undead night owl could have played in Tamriel's NBA. While the fight was still challenging, and it also made some unsettling noises, I was able to destroy the vampire quicker than I had destroyed the lich. It did slightly less damage to me than the glorified necromancer had done. However, I ended up catching some sort of disease from it, which normally wouldn't have been an issue, but this time I was completely out of cure disease potions. I distinctly remember carrying at least one when entering the dungeon, but I must have misclicked and used it up. In any case, once I secured the amethyst key, it was onto the southwestern corner of the level. The crystal key was being guarded by a Medusa. The Medusa was camping an island surrounded by lava. All things considered, it's not the trickiest enemy to deal with, but that ranged paralysis attack can be a real nightmare. Running straight at it down a narrow walkway is probably the worst tactic, but it's all I could do here. Eventually though, after a lot of trial and error, I made it onto the island, bested the serpent lady, and recovered the final key. Unlocking the 5 doors, I booked it into the final zone. As mentioned before, level 3 really utilized platforming, something that hasn't really been a thing up until Dagoth-Ur. The main chamber was flooded with lava. Scattered around the area were small islands. These were what the player needed to use in order to make it to the central structure. Accurately judging those long jumps wasn't easy to begin with. Combine those with the spellcasters and ranged enemies that were stationed all around, this could have possibly been one of the trickiest areas in the entire game. I cursed my Nord's warrior bones, thinking if only I had some sort of levitation spell. However, that's when I remembered, a long time ago, I had picked up a potion of levitate. It was just sitting there in my inventory, waiting for a rainy day. Popping it, I was able to fly right on over to the middle of the zone, no problems at all. In that moment, it was truly a game changer. Although, I had some other issues that I was dealing with. I had just run out of potions of Heal True, and I only had about 40 or so regular health pots left. Backtracking through 3 zones with under 50 was scary business for me, but it would have to do. Leaping into the center of the structure, I landed on the 8th and final piece of the Staff of Chaos. Getting near it, I was presented with this level's only riddle. It went from the beginning of eternity to the end of time and space, to the beginning of ever end and the end of every place. What am I? I assumed the answer was going to be something deep, like life or death. It actually ended up just being the letter E. This lowered the surrounding walls, allowing for me to escape the box. Grabbing a hold of the 8th piece, the staff reconnected and power surged through my character's body. The game displayed a message saying I was worthy, to go in peace, and to have my fate written in the elderscrolls. All that was left now was to leave Dagoth-Ur. Since I was low on potions, I really tried to take advantage of resting for a full health bar. In doing so, I triggered another vision from Jagar-Tharn.
I congratulate you on your success. Have you discovered, however, what I have known all along? The staff is drained of all magical potential. I did it myself before scattering the pieces across the realm. It is a useless stick, good for churning butter or rowing a boat, but not for saving the Emperor. Come find me if you dare, and I will relieve you of any further burdens you may think to face. My legions await.
I mentioned it before, but Rhea Silmane's prior visit was her last. We unfortunately don't get to see her again in the game. It didn't feel like a proper goodbye or send-off either. There wasn't a lot of closure, but I suppose her ghost speaking to the player was closure enough. There's one final dungeon to deal with, and then that's a wrap on Arena. I didn't get a chance to talk about Dagoth-Ur's lore yet. If you played Morrowind, you know exactly how important this stretch of Red Mountain really is. It's endgame territory for the Nerevarine. However, in Arena, the messages really only relay how hot, ashy, and fiery the volcano is. Prior to that, we learned how this was a central smithing area to the dwarves. But nothing is shared on its importance to the Chimer, the Dunmer, the Sixth House, House Endoril, etc. While the lore was simply not fleshed out at the time, it does make some sense as to why the player wouldn't have heard anything about it. The Sixth House was rather secretive and dormant up until the events of Morrowind. The Dunmer don't exactly like Outlanders meddling in their affairs, and probably wouldn't have openly shared said information. Plus, during Arena, the main quest has you put your head down and move full steam ahead through the dungeons. Given the 38-year difference between the start of each game, it's pretty interesting to think that somewhere in a separate chamber of Dagoth-Ur, Dagoth-Ur himself is preparing for total domination. Successfully leaving the dungeon with my diseased body and lack of health potions, I practically kissed the ground of Ebonheart. It was now time to gear up for one final ride, the assault on Jagar-Tharn. I had pretty much blown through most of my gold on provisions for Dagoth-Ur, so I was pretty worried that I wouldn't be able to afford any more potions. However, I got lucky in that I was able to recover quite a few bracelets, amulets, and marks from the dungeon. Selling those, I racked up a whopping 14,000 septims and bought as many consumables as I could get my hands on. When ready, I popped open the map and traveled to the Imperial City. Technically, this multicultural utopia is the last stop before the point of no return. So you've got some time to think about last minute gear and supplies before you go on inside. Feeling good and ready, I approached the Imperial City Palace and went on in.
I have watched as you blundered your way to this place. At one time, I even considered approaching you with an offer to lead my Imperial Guard. But it is plain that you are not worthy of such a position. Be not fooled by what you would call success in your journey across the Empire, for you have never faced a being as powerful as I. Your death shall be slow and torturous, a suffering that shall span the millennium. Come, I await you in the dungeons below.
Of course, the game's finale has 4 levels to it. Honestly, I was surprised the palace didn't crank things up to 5 or 6 levels. Here's the kicker with this dungeon though. The first 3 zones really aren't that difficult to get through. Sure, the enemy encounters are tough, and I died so many times at the very beginning, but the navigation and crawls were really straightforward. After battling through the onslaught of wraiths by the entrance, the rest of the enemies weren't so bad. They were mostly knights, likely Tharn's servants transformed into humans. The zone itself is really small, and there are 3 different access points to zone number 2. I traveled to the northwestern corner and went on through that doorway. Of course, this spat me out in one of 3 entranceways. I was placed in the same corner and had to travel south to the next set of stairs. The way there wasn't so straightforward, but again, the level itself is rather small. With the path I had chosen, I battled against foes like liches, homunculi, and iron golems. Singled out and separated from one another, nothing was really that difficult, but they were time and potion consuming fights. Towards the end, I started to get overwhelmed with Medusae and ranged casters. Having enough, I gave up on fighting and booked it for the doorway. At this point, I was 2 zones down and only had 2 more to go. I could smell the end credits from here. I would honestly put Dagoth-Ur as the tougher dungeon, at least from my personal experience. However, level 3 is where things got rather interesting. I was placed at the center of the map. Just west of me was a doorway leading to the 4th and final zone. Maneuvering over and putting in minimal effort, I was successfully in the last level. I could hardly believe it. It just seemed too good to be true. Well, that's because it was. This entrance was meant for players who had access to Pass Wall. It comprised of a long narrow corridor that led to a dead end. On the other side, I could hear several liches screeching and firing off their destruction spells. Some of them were even able to hit their mark, aka me, on the opposite end of said wall. I tried to find an alternative way through, but came up short. With no other options, I returned to level 3 and had to meander my way to the next access point. It was currently south of my position, but with the pathway laid out, I had to go through half of the zone to get there. I fought through fire demons and iron golems while avoiding vampires and Medusae, mainly because I had tunnel vision for that last zone. Eventually, I made it over to the alternative entry point and went on into level 4. This might be the zone that I'm the least proud of. From where I spawned in, it essentially consisted of 4 very long walkways. Those walkways led to a lake of lava, and at its central island is my final destination. The catch is that those long hallways are filled with liches. It isn't the periodically placed evolved necromancer, it's literally every 20 or so steps, you'll see 1 or 2 of them bunched up. I thought to myself, do I really want to fight through all of these things? I honestly think my weapon would have been destroyed, I'd have run out of potions, or I would have constantly been overwhelmed. As a proud Nord warrior, I'm sure it shamed my character to tuck tail and book it past every single lich. However, as a guy just trying to finish the game, I had zero qualms with this tactic. Even so, it took me countless attempts to rush past every single enemy. I must have died upwards of 15 or so times before I finally made it to the lake of lava. However, once there, I made a leap for the central island and was able to catch my breath for a few moments. This was it, the final part of the Elder Scrolls arena. I had no clue what awaited me inside, but I was ready for anything. Going for a swim in the fiery lake, I climbed up into the chamber and was greeted by a vampire. Or at least, that's what I thought it was. After several seconds and not being able to land a single hit, I noticed the being's staff. This wasn't a vampire. This was Dagoth-Ur. None of my melee attacks were landing, and it didn't seem like I was meant to defeat him like this. Looking around, the chamber contained 4 cages. The southern cages contained treasure, while the northern ones were meant for the main quest. The northwestern cell held a mithril key. This key unlocked the northeastern cell. Inside was a floating jewel, the final piece to this game's puzzle.
Truly a child of the Empire, I thank thee for thy assistance. I have a particular idea as to the question of your service in mind. From this day forth, thou art named the Eternal Champion. From thy hand shall be dealt the needs of the Empire. I, Uriel Septim, true Emperor of Tamriel, do decree and thus make law. Arise, my champion, and take thy rightful place.
As Uriel Septim VII signs off, the game displays one last message for me. It reads, "You have proven yourself a worthy champion of the Empire, and such service shall not be easily forgotten. Hang not your sword above the mantle, nor place your spellbook upon the shelves. Many such adventures still await your hand. This was but one chapter in the story of the Elder Scrolls." As the scene cuts away, I'm brought back out into the Imperial City. Even though the main questline is finished, there are still dungeons to explore and side quests to embark on. Attempting to re-enter the Imperial Palace, a guard respectfully tells me that it's under reconstruction due to the catastrophic damage. With that, thus wraps up the main story of the Elder Scrolls Arena and my adventure through the game. Before signing off, I wanted to really quickly discuss my closing thoughts. My highs, lows, the story, the gameplay, and if I would recommend this game after playing through it. For me, the highs would have to be that special hit of dopamine I got after retrieving a staff piece. In the Elder Scrolls Arena, I really felt like I had to put in the work. I had to focus, dial in, come up with strategies for certain areas, and be on top of my keyboard shortcuts. Other than maybe Morrowind, I had never felt like that while running through an Elder Scrolls dungeon. The challenge was definitely there, even with a map to show me the way through. Successfully collecting those staff fragments, even the artifacts for the factions, were feelings that I can hardly describe. Having those nerves and stress while crawling through the dungeon to letting out a sigh of relief upon returning to the city. To me, those were the highs of my playthrough. As for the lows, honestly, I really wanted to quit after completing the Elden Grove. The dungeons were getting longer, more meticulous, and the rewards felt less compelling. Staff fragments 4 through 6 were such a drag, mostly because the gameplay was so repetitive. Help out a local faction, crawl through a dungeon. Discover location of staff piece, crawl through a dungeon. The first 3 pieces and the last 2 were at least a little more enjoyable, but I think that was because 1 through 3 was still novel, while with 7 and 8, the end was in sight. In any case, the repetitiveness of this game was starting to get to me. Another low, while not as low as the previous low, were the dungeon breaking glitches. Mostly when the enemies blocked my swimming path. It happened twice, once in the Elden Grove and another in the Temple of Agamanus. For some reason, likely just knowing that I could have had to go through those dungeons all over again, those were really frustrating times. I didn't show it, but I was stuck on each of those points for upwards of 10 minutes. It's a very minor thing, and it's over now, but it still makes my blood boil just thinking about it. Next, my thoughts on the story. Unfortunately, from a narration standpoint, most of this game was action. The story could probably be summarized in less than 5 minutes. Most of the plot was at the beginning and at the end. The middle part, finding the staff pieces, didn't really offer much in the way of a relevant story. However, I did get to explore through some famous places in Tamriel, and I learned a little bit about them. I also got acquainted with some of the continent's more obscure factions and groups, like the Brotherhood of Seth and the Conclave of Baal. I learned about enemies like Sir Galandir, Selene, Golthog, the Priests of the Mad God, etc. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're only paying attention to Rhea Silmain and Jagar-Tharn, the plot is fairly basic. However, if you take the time to think about all of the finer details, the people you meet along the way, the places you visit, and the things you encounter, this game's story is beautiful and rich. It makes sense why the citizens call Tamriel the arena. There's so much bloodshed. Each faction is vying for power, attacking one another in the main cities. The Midnight Society roams around during sundown, and the people are terrified. It isn't safe to leave the confines of the city, as monsters and creatures are lurking just beyond. In terms of sustenance to the Elder Scrolls series, Arena doesn't offer nearly as much as future titles. However, in terms of kicking off the series and following through with its own unique story, Arena presents itself incredibly well. As for the gameplay, the game's over 30 years old. I won't critique anything too harshly. For the time, I'm willing to bet it was leagues ahead of its competitors. The first-person gameplay, looting, weapon condition, consumables, map size, etc. Of course, by today's standards, it's clunky, stiff, barren, and poorly designed. Other than my eyesight suffering from the graphics, I actually had a better time with the game than I thought I'd have. The bones of Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim are certainly there. You can clearly see where the evolution took place. It's interesting to see too how the basic XP mechanic of fantasy games was used here, but taken out for future installments. I wouldn't say it made leveling easier or more difficult. I'm about the same level I usually am by the end of the main story. I guess though, it made leveling more simplified. You don't have to worry about which major and minor skills you're using, just about how many enemies you kill, which quests you go on, and how much you've explored. Overall, while I prefer the direction of the later Elder Scrolls games, I can respect Bethesda for starting with the norm and breaking out into something rather unique. Then lastly, would I recommend this game to others? When I did my initial thoughts video, I said everyone should play Arena to help develop a better appreciation for the later titles. After playing through the main questline, my thoughts have changed. I 100% would not recommend this game to anyone in the modern day. At least, not anyone who's looking to experience a great story in the Elder Scrolls universe. If anything, I'd probably tell the hardcore challenge-seeking player to give it a try. Someone who enjoys difficult dungeon crawls and likes to challenge themselves. It's not even that the game is that hard, but honestly, the action is the bulk of the game. It feels like the story is there to help move the action along, instead of the opposite. So yeah, if you're a casual fan of the Elder Scrolls, I probably would not suggest Arena to you. But if you're a fan and enjoy endless combat, by all means, Arena will treat you well. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the story and the game as a whole, and until next time, keep on adventuring.